Hey everybody, so I'm going to be telling my labor and delivery story, and I'm going to try and tell it quickly because the baby is asleep and he's been asleep for like an hour and a half, so he's going to wake up soon. So if you hear him making noises, that's because he's really close. I'm like pulling his thing, so I'll try to show him. He's in there. So he's right there. And he has been asleep for a while, so I have to wake him up soon to eat because he sleeps for a long time during the day. And then he won't sleep at night. So everything kind of started on April 30th, which was mine and Julio's 1-year anniversary. And I had an appointment with my doula, which a doula is, she's there with you when you're in labor and they help you cope with pain and everything. So I had my appointment with my doula and she gave me advice on how to induce myself, and I was 38 weeks and 3 days. So she told me a good way to induce myself would be to lift up my belly and then put it back down slowly, and that sometimes the baby's head just isn't in the right position for the labor to begin, even if they are head down. So I went to Julio's house that night and I did the belly thing, and then we went out to eat because it was our 1 year. So we went out to eat and we walked around a bit, and then when we came back to his house we went to sleep. And at midnight I woke up because I was having contractions, and they were about 10 minutes apart, but I could definitely feel like the peak, so I knew it was contractions. And they were all mostly in my hips and in my, just all around my waist, my lower back, and my thighs. My thighs were on fire. It hurt so bad. It felt like someone was ripping me apart. So at around 6 in the morning, I had been laboring in his room for like 6 hours, and Julio was asleep, but he would wake up and he would rub my back because it hurt so bad. And then at 6 in the morning I went and took a warm shower and drank a hot tea, and the shower is supposed to stop false labor and it didn't. It made it worse. So I was like, well, this is probably labor. And so I called my mom and she came, and she and my sister got there at around 7:45 around there, and then we got to the hospital at 8:45. So we went to triage, and then the lady checks me and she's like, well, you're at a 3, almost a 4, so we're gonna send you on a walk for an hour, and then we're gonna check and see if you're progressing or not, and if you're not, well, then we're gonna send you home. So I went and we walked around the whole entire hospital for an hour, and we came back at 9:45. And then at 9:45 she checks me and I was at a 4, so she told me she was gonna call my doctor and let him know and see if he wanted to admit me, and he did. So then they couldn't find a nurse for me, so we had to wait in the waiting room for another hour, and I was walking around this whole entire time. So I would just walk around, and I had my doula there with me, and my sister and Julio and my mom. And so we were walking around, and I would do like squats and moving my hips a lot because my hips were about to break in half. My hips were hurting so bad. It was mainly my hips and my thighs that hurt the worst. It wasn't even my stomach. But when it would hurt in my stomach, it was just my lower, like underneath my belly. And then at like 10 something or 11, they admitted me into my labor and delivery room, and they have to monitor you for 20 minutes, and then you can get off the monitors and do whatever you want, labor however you want, and that you can only do that for 40 minutes, labor however you want. Then you have to get back on the bed and get monitored for another 20 minutes. So those 20 minutes in the bed were the worst because laboring in bed is horrible. And so those 20 minutes I was just laying there like, I'm gonna die. And then the lady comes in to give me my IV, and I was freaking out because if you know me, you know I'm scared of needles to death, and I will cry and cry and cry forever. And so she comes in and she's like, I'm the best here. I get it 98% of the time, blah blah. And so she gives me my IV and she messes up. She messed up so bad, and she left me with this huge bruise all over my arm. And yeah, it's been a week and it's still there, so it was really bad. And after that, she's like, I'm gonna get another lady to come in and do it. And I was like, what, you missed? Because I was crying, it hurt so bad. But it was kind of good because I had my attention on the IV and on the contractions because I was getting a lot while I was sitting on that bed. And so she's like, I'm gonna go get another lady. And I was crying like so bad on that bed because I didn't want to get poked again. I'm terrified of needles, and the lady comes in and she's like getting the thing ready. I'm like, just give me a minute, just give me a minute. And I would sit there and I would just cry, and I'm like, just give me another minute. And so she finally does it, and she's like, do you want me to count, or do you want me to let you know what I'm doing? And I was like, no, just do it. And so she just does it, and it didn't hurt. I just felt the needle, and then it was done. So I was like, wow, I should have gone this lady first. So then they put a glove over my hand, and then they wrapped it up. But when they wrapped it up over where the first IV had gone in. So my IV was hurting the whole entire time because the tape was wrapped around the first one, and it was so bad. So then I got into the shower, which I thought I would be kind of embarrassed because, you know, my doula was like a stranger, but it wasn't embarrassing at all. I was like, I'm not going to want to take any of my clothes off. But when I got in that shower, everything came off. I did not care at all. It was just, everything was hurting. So she's like, because at first I had like my bra on and everything, and she's like, do you want to take your bra on? Your bra off. It's going to feel better. And I was like, no. And then a couple minutes passed, and I was like, Mom, get this damn thing off of me. And so then I was just in there, and you would think that it's kind of awkward or embarrassing, but honestly, when you're in labor, you really don't care. So I was just in there, and there's a chair in front of me, and I had my arms on it and my head on it, and then I was on my knees. So they had like the little rinser thing in the shower, and my mom had hot water on, and so she would have the rinser on my lower back, and then my doula was pressing on my hips and massaging me, and the lights were off. So, and there was also music and then candles. So I was falling asleep and I was so tired because I had not slept at all, and I was just laying there falling asleep, and she's just like, you can't fall asleep, and I was falling asleep. So it was just really hard to stay awake, and that just shows how well the shower helped to be falling asleep during contractions. And the contractions would come, and when I would get really bad ones, I would just be like, I'm gonna get medicine once this contraction's over. And the contraction would be over, and I'm like, well, there's no point to get medicine, it's over. And then another contraction would come, I'm like, I'm getting medicine this time, and then be over, and I'm like, well, there's no point. So I was like that for like 4 hours. And so then the lady comes back to check me after the 40 minutes passed, and she's like, you're at a 6, almost 7. So I was like, wow, that was quick. And then I had to labor on the bed, which sucked. And I was just crying. Well, actually, no, I wasn't crying, but I was just like trying to deal with it, and it hurt a lot. And so then they let me off, and I got back in the shower right away because I tried the yoga ball and I tried standing, and nothing worked as good as the shower did. The shower almost took the entire pain off of the contractions. I only felt like 10 or 20 contractions. From 4 to 9, I only felt like 10 or 20 of them in the shower. So that was really, really good because I was in there for like 4 hours, 5 hours, something like that. And I feel so bad because my mom kept trying to make me stand up because she was so tired, and she was just standing there with the little thingy the whole entire time. And so I got back in the shower and everything was going fine, and I sat on the chair instead and had the chair was turned, and I was sitting on it, and I had my hands on the back of the chair, and I was falling asleep. And so I kept dozing off and then waking back up, and I'm like, why does this hurt so bad now? Because it started to hurt worse. And so I started crying, and I'm like, Mom, I need the epidural. And she's like, why do you want it? I'm like, I'm tired, I want to go to sleep. And she's like, but you have to push soon, you're almost 7. And I'm like, but I don't want to push, I just want to go to sleep. So I wanted to go to sleep, and I didn't want to be in labor anymore. I didn't want to have a baby. I wanted to go to sleep. And I was just like, can't we just do this tomorrow? And they were just like, no, you're gonna have to push. And I was like, no, I want to go to sleep. So I started crying super bad, and I'm like, I need the epidural. So my sister presses on the little button, and the lady comes in, and she's like, I had pressed on the button before, like when she told me I was almost a 7, and I had asked for pain medicine, and she told me that I could get pain medicine, but the pain medicine would go to the baby and it wouldn't take the pain off of the contractions. It would just make me like really out of it, so I wouldn't focus on them as much. But when she said it would go to the baby, I was like, well, no, I'm not gonna get it now. So when she buzzed it the second time, the lady comes in and I'm like, I need pain medicine, I need the epidural or something. And she's like, well, you can't get any more pain medicine because you're too far along. And so my mom's like, well, check her again. So they go and they check me and she's like, you're at a 9. And I was like, at a 9, I need the epidural now, because I didn't want to feel the ring of fire. I didn't want to feel his head pop out. I didn't want to feel myself tear or anything. I didn't want to feel the being stitched. So I was like, I need the epidural. And I started freaking out really bad. And I was having like anxiety attacks and it was just really bad. And to top it off, they had to put me on the monitors. So she made me sit in the rocking chair and it helped for a couple of minutes until I started really freaking out about the fact that I needed the epidural. So I'm like, you have to get me the epidural now. And so the lady's like, okay, well, we're gonna go get you the epidural. And my mom's like, no. So if you know, if you're under 18, you need your parents to sign for the epidural. And my mom was not about to sign. So I'm like crying and I'm like, Mom, I'm sorry, but you have to do it. You can't just leave me here. And it was really emotional. My sister started crying and my mom was already bawling her eyes out, and my sister was telling her, just give it to her. She's in a bunch of pain. And it was so bad. I didn't think it was gonna be that bad, and it was horrible. And so I'm like crying my eyes out and I can't breathe, and so they're like, everybody needs to leave. And my mom's over here arguing with the nurse, because the nurse is like, we're gonna give her the epidural even if you don't sign for it. And my mom's like, you can't do that, she's under 18. So my mom's arguing and I'm like, someone take me for a walk. So I go with my doula and my sister and Julio, and we're walking around, and there's other people walking around that are clearly not as far as I am, because they're still like smiling and talking, and they're just sitting there and they're hearing me cry and they're hearing me like asking for this epidural. So I'm pretty sure I scared everybody. And so Julio is telling me all this nonsense and I'm holding on to my sister and rocking back and forth, and the doula is pressing on my hips, and Julio's telling me like, I'm gonna get you 1,000 cats. And if you know, I love cats, but no one in my family loves cats except for me, and Julio doesn't like cats. So he's like telling me, I'm gonna get you 100 cats, and what are you gonna name your cats? So I'm over here telling him all the names of my cats, and he's like, I'm gonna get you 500 fraps and all this and makeup, and we're gonna go to the Cheesecake Factory. So he was telling me all this nonsense, and it was helping a lot because I was focusing on him and I was like, what are you talking about? So when we come back from my walk, which my walk was like 10 minutes long, my mom is still arguing with the lady, and I go and the lady's like, do you want the epidural? And I was just like I didn't know what to tell her. So they're like, well, my mom's like, well, check her again. I was like, I don't want to get checked again, I want the epidural now. And then my mom starts arguing with the lady again, and the doctor, my doctor who delivered my baby, he's like waking up, he's making faces. She's like, or he's like, he comes in, he's like, well, let's see how far along you are. And he's like, you're 9, almost to 10. And at that point, I was having anxiety attacks one after the other, so they had to get everybody out of the room except for me and 2 nurses and then the doctor. And so they took everybody out of the room, and they had to put me on a monitor because of all the anxiety attacks I was having. So they put me on the monitor, and then I'm like laying on this bed, and can you imagine, like, I'm at 9.5 centimeters and I'm laboring in bed, and that was like the worst. So the nurses really helped, and one nurse was holding onto my hips and the other one was holding my hand, and I keep telling her, I'm like, you have to help me, someone has to help me because I can't do this. And she's like, well, you have to do this, you don't have a choice anymore. And I was like, but I can't do this, I'm too small, because I'm a really small person. And so I was like, I'm gonna end up dead or something, someone has to help me because I'm not gonna be able to push this baby out. Because the whole time I was pregnant, they were telling me like, your baby is measuring like 2 weeks ahead and blah blah. So I was like, this is gonna be a huge baby and he's just gonna tear me apart, and I'm gonna be torn apart. And so I keep telling her, I'm like, you have to help me, he's too big, I can't get him out. And they're just like, no, you're the only one who can do this. And I was like, you can't help me push? And she's like, no, I can't help you push, I'm sorry. And so she, like, the contractions were so bad, and she's like, pick a focus point and just stare at it. And so I pick her, so I'm just staring at her, and so I probably creeped her out too, because I'm just staring at her face this whole entire time. And she had blue eyes, so I was like focused on her eyes. And then she's just talking to me, and I'm like, but I'm scared, I can't do it, and I'm scared. And she was like about to cry too, and I'm just telling her, like, I'm scared, I can't have a baby. And so, like, the doctor comes in, and he's really, really casual. And I think that was my favorite thing, was how casual he was, because it calmed me down a lot. He's like, well, let's see what we have here. And he goes to check me again, and no one had broken my water. So he's like, we're gonna break your water. And I was like prepared to feel like Niagara Falls just rushing out. And he breaks it with something I don't even know, because I wasn't looking at this, like, I was just looking up because there's this little blue light, and so I was just looking at it. And so he breaks my water, and it just feels like I peed myself. And it was not like other people said, it was like gushing and gushing and gushing. It wasn't like that. So he breaks my water, and he's like, okay, we're gonna sit through a couple contractions, and then we're gonna have you push. So I'm freaking out, and I'm like, I can't push him out. I don't want to feel the ring of fire, I don't want to feel my stitches, I don't want to feel anything. And he's like, well, you have to push. And I was like, I just want to sleep. And he's like, you can't sleep now. And I'm crying, and they're like, you can't cry, you have to stay strong. And so they let the doula in and Julio back in, and so they're holding my hands, and the doula's like telling me like I can do this and I can do this, and I'm just telling her I can't do this, I'm gonna die. And it really feels like you're gonna die when you're at 10, because it's just like non-stop pain, and you're just like something, like I'm gonna explode or something. And so Julio's like telling me like you can do this and blah blah, and I'm not listening to no one. I'm just like I'm dying. And so then she's like, do you feel like you have to poop? And I was like, yes, I feel like I have to poop. I'm about to poop myself now. And so she's like, are you, like, that's good? And I was like, no, I have to poop. And she's like, well, you know, we have to sit through a couple more contractions. And I was like, no, I have to poop. So my doctor comes, and he checks me, and he's like, well, you're at a 10. And I was like, I have to poop. And so he's like, well, that's the baby, that's pressure from the baby. And I was like, okay, well, then I have to push now. And so they're holding up my legs, and on my left side, I think it was Julio, my doula, Julio was definitely holding up my leg. So it was Julio, and I think the doula was holding up my thigh or something. And then on my right side, it was a nurse. And my doctor had like another doctor in there, and he was telling her what to do. And so they're like, push. And I'm like, no, like, I didn't want to push. So they're telling me I have to push, and I have to wait for the peak of the contraction. So I'm waiting for it, and I'm sitting there in pain, and he's having a bad dream. Oh, I feel so bad. But so I'm sitting there waiting for the peak of the contraction, and it comes, and I start pushing, and I feel her stick her fingers in. So she has 2 fingers in, and she's going around like that, like, to help me push his head out. And I'm over here like crying, and then I stop pushing, and they're like, no, you have to push, you have to keep pushing. And I'm telling them like, someone has to help me, you have to give me a C-section, you have to cut me or something, because I can't get him out. And they're like, we can see hair, his hair is red. And of course his hair is not red, but the lady was kidding because she had red hair. But at that moment I was serious, I was not taking any jokes. So I was like, I want to see this red hair. So they kept telling me like, do you want a mirror, do you want to feel his head? And I was like, no, I don't want to feel anything, I don't want to see anything, because if I saw, it was going to be a lot more painful. So I was just sitting there like crying, and they're like, you can't cry, you have to push. And then what happened? Oh, then they had music on, they had Pandora on, and All About That Bass comes on, and and my doctor and my sister start dancing. So I'm in labor, and he's dancing, and my sister's dancing, and he's like, this isn't really OB music. And so they're like trying to change the Pandora, and I'm over here trying to push. And so then they're like, we can see his head, like, you have to push. And I just felt like I was never gonna get his head out. And then I peed all over the nurse. So, you know, it was going great. So then she's just like, okay, you have to push harder, you're not pushing right. And I was freaking out. I'm like, well, how do I push? I don't understand. And so then I started pushing harder, and then all of a sudden I feel like this big bowling ball just stuck there, and I'm just like, I have to stop pushing because I don't know what's going on. And so I stop, and they're like, no, 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 keep going, you're almost there. And everybody's telling me that I'm almost there, and I feel like I'm far, far away from there. So they're like, push, push, push. And then I pushed again, and every time I pushed, I was like, why the hell did I push? And then every time I would stop, I would get the confidence to go and push again, and then I would be like, why the hell did I push again? Like, this is so painful. Why did I push? And so then they're just like, his head's out, and I didn't even feel his head pop out. I didn't even know what was going on. I was like like I was gone. And so they're like, his head is out, and like push again. And so I'm just like, oh my god, I thought his head was gonna, after his head it was just all gonna slide out like in the movies, and no, I had to push again. So I push, and then his arms pop out, and then they're like, I was telling them to pull him out, and the doctor's like, well, you pull him out, you grab him. And I was like, okay. And so I just reached down and I grabbed him, and I pulled the rest of his body out. And then I put him on my chest because I was already like half naked. It was really hot. Well, to me it was really hot. And so I pull him out and I just put him on me, and then he starts crying, and I was just bawling. And then my mom's over here like, good job, you did it. And then Julio's crying too, and everybody was crying. And then like it was crazy. I was just like, did I really do it? And so then Julio cut his cord after it stopped. I forgot what it's called, but after it stopped, the blood stopped going. Then Julio cut his cord, and the baby's over here crying. And then I don't even know what I was saying because everything just hurt. And then the doctor's like, you have to push a little bit more to deliver the placenta. And I was like, oh my god, are you serious? So then they're like, push and push and push and push. So then I had to keep pushing, and the placenta came out, which the placenta did not hurt when I delivered it. It didn't hurt when they were pressing on my stomach for the placenta to come out. So I was just like, whatever. And they showed Julio the placenta, and I thought it was disgusting. I didn't see it, but I don't know how he, watched all that. And then they're just like, good job. And I was just sitting there like, I almost died. Like, that was so painful. And then they're stitching me up, and I'm just watching them, and I'm just like, what are they doing? So, because I can see the string like coming up. And then my mom's like, did she tear? And the doctor's like, let's not talk about that. And then once they stitched me up, they threw a bunch of water on me. And then she's like, well, you're all cleaned up. And they're all like just cleaning me, and I'm just laying there with the baby, all like he's all covered in all this stuff, and I'm just like, I'm clean. So and then they take him, and they're like wiping him down and putting him in this little outfit, and they're measuring him and weighing him, and he weighed 6.13, and then he was 20 inches long, so he was actually a lot smaller than I thought he would be. And he's so cute. I'm watching him. I'm rocking the little thing. And then what happened next? Oh, so then my mom asked him again, how much did I tear? And he's just like, she didn't tear a lot, and I teared on one of my sides, so I didn't tear like going towards my butt. I teared on my side, which I find a lot better than tearing towards my butt, because I don't know, it seems like it's not as bad. And he said I didn't tear that much. I only got one stitch, so that's good. And then they just left me there with the baby, and I didn't know anything to do. I've never had a baby before, so I'm just sitting there like, well, what do I do? So then my doula helps me get him to latch, which was horrible because his latch was really bad until the last couple of days. I got him to fix his latch, and so after that, everybody was just happy. Julio was holding the baby, everybody was holding the baby, and I was just laying there like, when can I sleep? And I didn't end up sleeping till nighttime anyways, and then I only slept every 2 hours. So yeah, that was basically my labor and delivery. It was really, really fast, and it wasn't easy, but up until like 7 centimeters it was pretty easy, and then after that it just got horrible. But he's waking up, so I'm going to pick him up and show him to you guys. He's really mad. He has his little eyes open, and he, of course, he barely has, like, I have really small eyes, Julio has really small eyes, so he has really small eyes, so it doesn't even look like, there you go, you see he has that eye open. He's using the bathroom. But, so yeah, that was my labor and delivery story, and yeah, so, so yeah, bye!